So there's going to be some guys out there that they're totally crushing it at work. They might have a director or VP level job, but they're coming home drained every day. They're short tempered with their wife and kids. They're disconnected and they're really longing for that reconnect in their lives. What would you say to that man right here, right now?
Ask them why they have optimized everything in their business except their health. And could they look in the mirror and say, yeah, I would hire that guy, looking back at themselves? Look sloppy. I can't look in the mirror. I don't feel good. My energy sucks. I'm asleep by 8:30 when I get home.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
I would ask them why they have optimized everything in their business except their health. And could they look in the mirror and say, yeah, I would hire that guy, looking back at themselves? Because quite often the answer ends up being no for the current state of where they're at. Because a lot of guys do spend so much time building their business, building their wealth, providing for the family. They ignore themselves because they just don't see it as a priority until it's either too late or they just have like an epiphany where they're like, yeah, I kind of have to handle my shit because my pants don't fit. I look sloppy. I can't look in the mirror. I don't feel good. My energy sucks. I'm asleep by 8:30 when I get home. All those things.
That's good advice. When we first met, of course, it was at a BK Live event. And I think it was you, Father Butler, and I just sitting there talking around. And I want to give you a little bit of gratitude right now because I had been struggling, right? I was doing all the work, but it felt like I was working twice as hard as everybody else out there. And I think I was 49 when we met, but I was working and working and working and trying to keep myself in shape, trying to keep my mental capabilities up, all of that stuff. And you punched me pretty hard in the gut that day when uh, we were talking, and I'm like, "Hey, your presentation was really awesome. De-evolution of man, pretty much." And we talked about uh, where I was with testosterone and different things like that. And you're like, "Hey, those are rookie numbers." That's not what you said, but that's how I took it.
I don't like purposely try to punch people in the gut, but it's just that's how I talk. So
No, it was good. It was good. It was a good wake up call for me. I learned a lot through your presentation and of course a lot through that conversation. But before we get into all that, you're called the queen of men's health. Now, how did that really come about, right? Because obviously you're a woman.
one of my friends, Alan Cosgrove, he's a very well-known coach in the industry. He nicknamed me that. I don't even know how long ago, but maybe 8 or 10 years ago. He was like, "It's like you're like the queen of men's health." And I was like, "I like that." So I always tell people, mostly on podcasts, I'm like, "This is not a self-proclaimed title. This is just my nickname." And it worked.
It does work. He named you that, but that's because of all this fantastic work that you're doing with men. So how did you really find that this was your specialty, was working with men rather than, trying to help, say, women who just had a pregnancy, trying to lose some fat or whatever?
So there's 2 different directions I can go with this. I will go both of them because one is more surface level and the other one's a little bit deeper. The technical way was when I graduated college, I majored in exercise science, and everyone with that major, they're like, I want to work with athletes. And that's like super saturated. They're all broke. It's a disaster in the strength conditioning world. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll start by working in a gym in my hometown, which is Greenwich, Connecticut, which is like super wealthy, the first town outside New York City. All the Wall Street guys have McMansions there. And I always preface it by saying I grew up normal, like single parent household. I didn't have a butler or anything. Through training guys at a commercial gym, I was training a lot of men who played golf. And I was like, golf's a sport, and it seems to be something that people with money play and they could afford to train. They take it seriously. They're very type A, very similar to athletes. I did not relate very well to the women in my town because many of them were, I want to say, more materialistic, and just like the conversations bored me. Like I didn't know anything about purses. Like I was just total tomboy. I'm like, can we talk about sports? So I trained a lot of the guys and I was like, well, they all play golf. Maybe I should learn something about golf because I knew nothing. So there's an actual golf fitness certification. I went through that program. This is like in 2008. Went through that and became the go-to golf fitness person in Greenwich. All men were my clientele. So naturally, the conversation would shift to nutrition and energy and all this stuff. And I was like, nobody's talking to these guys about this. Like, they all say, yeah, I want to hit the ball farther, but it really turned into like, well, how do I lose my love handles and like, fill out my shirt and all that stuff. So I was like, interesting. And a business coach I had back then was like, no one's capitalizing on men's health because it was all women's health, women's fitness certifications, women's everything. And he's like, there's no women in men's health. And I was like, you are right. So that's pretty much how I ended up where I am. I trained people in person for 18 years, switched to online full-time in 2020, like many people did. But I started online in 2016 because a lot of people were like, how do I work with you online? I actually didn't even want to do online coaching. Like I always say that story. I'm like, I didn't want to fucking be here, but we're here. Like, that's why. And now I love it. Like I have a team of 3 coaches. We work with high performing men over 40. We handle blood work, nutrition, training, all that stuff. But it wasn't until like a little bit deeper into my work that I realized the true purpose of this was relating back to my personal relationship with my father. My dad and my mom divorced at 2, and he actually moved to Florida, where I am now, at 13. And I didn't really have a present father in my life. And I didn't realize until I was older that he was bipolar and struggled. And we've had a very compromised relationship where we talk, we don't talk, talk, don't talk. And I realized, wow, I actually don't want guys to end up like him. I want them to have a great relationship with their kids, whether their parents are divorced or not. I've had various romantic relationships with men that were not a good fit as a result of my upbringing and relationship with my dad that also made me realize like I don't want guys to grow up like this. So there's the technical version of how I got here, and then there's the kind of like deeper emotional version.
Yeah, I like that deeper emotional version because I'm on the same path myself. I keep on finding myself drawn into the men's suicide rates.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, it's 49,000 people in the United States who actually commit suicide, and 39,200 of those are men. And that's alarming to me. There's 80% of the men who are out there, and in my opinion, it's carrying all this weight and not knowing how to put it down, right? Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, whatever. And in your experience, how has that helped men really with their mental capacity with what you do?
Men find it easy to open up to me just because having that female side, I think, disarms the ego part of them. Men traditionally and historically have been conditioned that if they're vulnerable, if they share struggles, things like that, or even ask for help, that's a weakness. So I don't ever say that. I don't make them feel like that. I call myself the vault. Like people tell me all sorts of stuff, but nobody doesn't get repeated. So I've always been somebody who likes to make people feel comfortable and safe and be able to open up. So I think that helps them with at least the first step of asking for help, which is hiring us as their team, because that can also be looked at as a weakness because most guys will say, well, I know how to train. I don't need help, blah, blah, blah. Like, and I always tell them, listen, I've been doing this close to 25 years now. I've had my own coach for 8 years. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff myself. Like, my time is much better used, put into my business or other things. Like, why would I want to have to manage my health and figure out like what my training program is going to look like set myself up for success when I travel, all that stuff? No one has time. So when I tell them that, they're like, oh, wow, like I never thought of it that way. So as they come into the program, when we get them to like effectively clean up maybe bad habits or train a different way, you know, population that you deal with, that I deal with, a lot of these guys do too much almost, where they burn themselves out. They're training 5-6 days a week. They're not eating enough calories. So they know their way around the gym. They're not necessarily obese, but they have some fat to lose, or they've just gotten as lean as they can by themselves. And then they're kind of like, I'm eating 1,800 calories. I don't know really where else to go. So it's kind of like, well, they're here by choice, but also there's really nothing else that's working for them. And so when we're able to show them, here's system, here's a structure that can actually get you back to feeling better, looking better, being the guy that you used to be, then obviously the trust level goes way up. And they realize like, okay, this is not just like macros in a workout program. It's like a whole team dedicated to me being like the 2.0 version of me.
Right. And I think that's important. I mean, for guys, we do have egos, but we also have a lot of, insecurities underneath and different things. And, I mean, everybody's got their own suitcase full of baggage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at it in my life and, after we talked, I have a trainer and all that, but we also talked about testosterone, right? And just getting back to feeling like a man again. But I think that comes through all of the training that you discussed, as well as, what you're doing or what your body's doing on the inside. And since I've taken your advice and I went and saw hormone doctor and different things, my relationship with my wife's better. My relationship with my kids are better. I'm not overcompensating on a lot of areas. I don't have to train so hard at 50 years old as what I used to, Actually, I can eat a lot. I don't know, not a lot better, but I can enjoy eating again, and not have to worry about keeping the weight off. So when we talk about, there's the training portion, but there's also the physiology of the person or the man. How did you get into that side of things? Because you're, of course, an expert in the field.
Probably because there's so many coaches out there nowadays, especially online, that don't know what they're doing. And I'll never speak disparagingly about specific people. And again, it's not like someone specific I'm thinking of, but it's conversations I have with guys on a daily basis where they're like, this is what my last coach had me do for this long. And I'm like, oh my God. Or they did it themselves, or they're a coach themselves, and they just, you can't negotiate with yourself. Even me, like I would not negotiate with myself, but you have to manage like how somebody's body is going to respond to input. So with that input, it's usually stressors. Training is a stressor. Work is a stressor. Life is a stressor. Not eating is a stressor. Eating too much is a stressor. Being low T is a stressor. So certain things you can control, some you can't. You can control training, you can control nutrition. It's very difficult to control sleep, your children, work, all that stuff. But you can choose how you want to react to it and respond to it. So if we can control all the variables, it allows for more of a seamless experience. And this is why we don't do training only or nutrition only, because we want to align the training and the nutrition, because sometimes the way that you train, there's certain adaptations that happen that are calling for maybe more carbohydrates than not, and vice versa. So you have to know physiology for that. So if someone says like they can't handle carbohydrates, doesn't work for them, or certain things happen, there's a reason for that. Doesn't mean that they're being silly or whatever, but if you're like, for example, if you have a very low level of aerobic conditioning, you're probably not going to handle carbohydrates as good as if you actually did. not a lot of guys love doing aerobic work. So that makes sense when they're like, yeah, I gain a ton of weight when I add carbs in. And a lot of this is usually water weight because your body's like, oh, I get carbs. I don't really know what to do with this. So I'm just going to kick it back out of the cells and it'll feel watery and gross. And guys equate that as fat. So
Right.
it's understanding that and not reacting emotionally to what a client says. Whereas inexperienced coaches or people who don't understand physiology might be like, oh my God, he had a bad reaction to carbs. We're just going to cut them even more because then that's going to be even more detrimental to their health. So that's just one example, but it's also knowing like when do you toggle things? Like I can look at somebody who's been with us for a while and be like, we have to add calories in. Or if they've been dieting, we need like 2 or 3 days of a refeed, and I can calculate the grams of carbs that they would need. And then also calculate for them if they saw like a bump in the scale weight, which does not happen as much as you think. I could calculate like, yeah, you should see maybe like 1.5 to 2 pounds on the scale. When you give those precise points, people are like, wow, like that's cool. But you have to know physiology for that to happen. So, and it comes with repetition. Like when I first started out, I was like, I don't know where to start with people, but obviously almost 25 years into this, like I can just look at you and be like, yeah, it's time to go up in calories, or you're probably a little bit burnt. Part of this is visual, part of this is metrics, data, just knowing the client, knowing their body, knowing how they react to stuff.
So when we first talked, I'm going to dive into this a little bit. It seemed like you knew exactly what to tell me just by looking at me that day. Do you remember that conversation or what you saw in me that day that got me there? No.
No, sorry.
So that day you like came right out of the gate, right? I mean, we had talked about testosterone and stuff, you know, you had spoke about it up on stage, but you know, I don't even know how I mentioned it to you, but you know, I told you that I had gone on testosterone because of my primary care physician, and then he pulled me off, and then you took over, and I mean, it was like, yeah, you pretty much told me that you could tell that I was low in testosterone that day. What would be some of those indicators? Yeah,
I probably was all hyped up from my talk. That's why.
it wasn't in a poor way, by the way, Ali. It was in a way that you know I really enjoyed it at the time. You know, it was
Good.
I was learning.
I mean, it wouldn't be crazy if I offended somebody, so that tends to happen sometimes. But because I remember where we talked, like we were by like the overlooking the restaurant. So I remember where we were. I just don't remember the specific conversation. But whatever we were talking about, it must have been in your demeanor, and the way that you were talking about it, because from a conversation to tell if somebody's low T, usually it's a little bit more apathetic and maybe they don't have a ton of confidence in what they're telling you. So I don't think you had a lot of confidence in the primary care or what he had you doing. So I think that might have been the clue to me. Not to say I'm like this wizard who can just like be like, yes, you have low T, you don't. You know, like I don't want to paint that picture, but that's usually.
I get you. Yeah, and it just kind of going back to that story, you know, he had taken me off. He said, you know, you're at the level, and you started talking about, well, let's talk about the range first. And I can't remember the numbers, but I was absolutely in awe with how big of a range it was.
Oh, yeah. It used to be 350 was the lowest and go up to 1100. Now various lab companies have reduced that twice since 2012. Many of them start at like 220 to 250 and go up to like 100, which is abysmal because you take a guy who's like 30 years old and he's like, I feel like shit, but his test is 270. You're going to say, oh, you're fine. You know?
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I think I was sitting at like 350 when I got tested. I've been working with Whitmer out of St. Louis, and he's been fantastic. But I sit at about 950 right now, and it was, you know, numbers don't tell the whole story, of course, as you know, but 950 is definitely a lot better number than sitting at 350. I'm not tired. I wake up crisp. My thoughts are clear. And, you know, I guess I don't talk about this subject a lot with other men, but are those kind of the things that you see with men who go on testosterone? Is
Yeah, like most guys associate it with like sexual health or muscles. And if they have a good sex drive or a decent sex drive, they're like, oh, my test is fine. And I'm like,
right?
is it? But
It
the
could be
symptoms,
better.
yeah, the symptoms guys don't think of is like the brain fog, not being able to recover from not just workouts, but life. Like life beats you up. So if you're just dragging ass like every day, might not be the best way to live. But the first thing guys usually notice when they do go on is the energy goes up, the sleep gets better, ability for mental cognition is more stable throughout the day versus that massive drop off. And then their mood is a little more regulated as well, where they're like, oh, wow, I actually like can think clearly and make executive decisions, whereas before they were just like staring at the ceiling. So a lot of that are like the first things that come about because the body composition changes that happen. Like it's not a switch where you just inject testosterone and then all of a sudden like you've got veins, you've got abs, you've got all this stuff. Like obviously that comes from what you're doing with training, nutrition, your whole lifestyle. So it is not the panacea that many guys would think it is. But when you do dial in everything else and then you bring testosterone in, it can be game changing for guys because their whole like everything changes. Like they're even over Zoom, I can tell like their confidence increases, their decision making is a lot more efficient. They don't really hesitate, they're not passive as much. So their whole demeanor changes as well. And those are a lot of some of the benefits that people maybe don't talk about so much because it's not sexy. It's more sexy to talk about sex and muscles.
And that's interesting too, because, growing up, really in the 90s, it seems that, there was, pro wrestlers and, bodybuilders and stuff taking tests, right? And you got this bad look to it. It was, it comes with rage. It comes with, sexual overdrive, right? Not sexual balance, but sexual overdrive. And a lot of things that are still stuck in people's mind, that it's, you're putting chemicals into your body, which
Yeah.
is total BS, right? I'm sure you hear all that all the time.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, it's synthetic and it's so bad for you." And I'm like, "It's a hormone you produce. Like your body makes it. It's just not making enough." But you'll take over the counter pills all day long. Or
Yeah.
alcohol is like the worst thing. Like it's the most toxic thing you can put in your body. They will go and drink, but testosterone's like, "Oh no," because it comes in a needle. Can't do that.
That's interesting too with the alcohol because it was almost immediately once that I started going back on test and got that balance that I actually stopped drinking as well. I
Mm,
didn't, I liked this new feeling of making decisions and everything else, and it was like an amplifier taking away that alcohol.
yeah.
I don't know, it was like this superpower now taking away the alcohol and doing the testosterone at the same time.
That's awesome because a lot of guys really reap the benefits when they cannot drink or not drink as much as maybe they were before.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So once again, I appreciate you for all that wisdom that you dropped on me in like that 15-minute time period. But so, there's guys out there listening right now, and they just heard us talk about, training and, the physiology and things like that, along with the testosterone. And kind of going back to that original question, we started off asking, what would you tell that guy? But if he's starting to have this awakening moment right now, hey, maybe there's something wrong, or not something wrong, but something out of balance in my life right now that could be optimized through my health. What kind of steps should he start taking right now?
It's always a good idea to get blood work done because most guys have never had it. Most guys don't go to the doctor ever unless it's like an emergency. So, luckily, you don't have to go to a doctor to get your blood drawn. We've got telehealth. So, I work with a telehealth company that handles all our blood work for our clients. and all our hormone optimization. So just getting labs done and not through a primary, because it's just not going to be enough. You also run the risk. Basically, it's insurance-based practice. So when you go through GPs or primaries, they're going by the laws of insurance, and insurance wants men to be under 300 for testosterone to qualify for testosterone. So you can walk in there and be told that you're fine, and you're really not fine. So when you go cash-based, you actually know what you're paying out of pocket. You get labs that your doctor won't run because they just don't see a need. And you get a deeper insight into how everything is collectively working together, not just testosterone in isolation, but also your cardiovascular markers, your metabolic function, your thyroid, like all of these things play well together. You need to see how they're operating together. And it's a baseline of just like, how am I functioning as a man? That would be the first step. Then I would audit everything in your life that adds stress, see how you respond to it. What can you control with that? So what are you doing with your diet? What is your training like? How is your sleep? Do you travel a lot? How do you navigate that? Is it like fuck it mode when I travel, or do you actually plan ahead? Like, all those variables need to go into consideration to be able to bring that next step or next version of you to the level that you want.
Nice. That blood work too, going back to that, I was absolutely amazed when Dr. Whitmer read it's the most advanced blood work response that I've ever gotten from any doctor ever. You know, he talked to me about my prostate because of markers and, you know, everything that you just talked about, the cardiovascular and, you know, just everything. And I was just amazed because really it wasn't that expensive. I probably would have paid as much as if I would have used insurance. And that's always the fear. Interestingly enough, over the past couple months, we just stopped doing insurance because we're finding out that cash basis is better for our family anyways. You know, it's the whole medical practice, and I didn't mean to take it down this road, but let's just be honest. It's a scam with the insurance companies as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Basically,
They're not really out for your health.
they're not. The analogy I use is like, if anyone's ever been to a nightclub, a bottle of vodka at a nightclub is not what it retails for on the shelf at a liquor store. There's a reason for that. Same thing with blood work. So if you go to your primary and you're like, here's a list of tests, like if you copy the Silverback panel and say, I want all these tests, he or she may say, yeah, I'll run these. But the lab might decide, well, these are not necessary, so we're going to send you a bill for $4,000 in the mail. That's the risk, because they can mark it up to whatever they want for whoever for no reason. But here you go. And if you walk into LabCorp with our blood work panel a la carte, it would cost around $3 or $4 grand, because that's what the insurance companies, they want to get. But when you work with a telehealth company or a private practice company, they tend to make their own relationship with these lab companies to get better pricing. So it's kind of a free for all. Like if you do have labs run through primary, you don't know if you're going to get a bill until you get the bill.
And it, you know, just the conversation. I mean, you care about the person's health, that man's health sitting in front of you. So, you know, just as with my doctor, I'm sure you go through everything and, you know, explain what it is, how it correlates and all that. I have never in my 50 years had a primary care physician. Sorry if there's any listening to the show, but I don't care. Yeah. But they don't sit down and take that kind of time with the patient. They don't explain it all. They might, you know, this one's a little bit out of whack and might explain that one, but they don't go through the whole thing to tell you where your optimal health is and should be and anything that you might want to be watching. I also have a friend who has, I want to say it's polycystic kidneys, and his hormone doctor is on top of that stuff, whereas primary care does not.
Yeah, it's, you know, part of it is staying in your own lane. So a lot of primaries will say they will handle testosterone and they will prescribe it. It's not in who's prescribing it, and it's not in who is doing the blood work so much. It's the management of it. So you can write a prescription, but doesn't mean it's going to be the right dosing frequency, the right dosage. They're not going to look at other hormones to make sure everyone's playing nice together, because that's not what they're taught. So they're great to have, like, if you need a general physical, if you need like a Z-Pack because you have a cold or stuff like that. Thank God we have them for that. But it would be like going to a cardiac surgeon and saying, hey, can you fix my torn ACL in my knee? No, you shouldn't try either.
So just not going to work out on that aspect. So let's say that he goes to his primary care physician and he gets his testosterone checked. And it's borderline right at the level it's sitting at 300 or whatever. And, he just wants to work through this on his own, which I would not suggest. But, how would he know how far to go with testosterone, right? I mean, what are some of the things that we look for when we're trying to balance out that man?
Basically, like resolving some of the symptoms we were talking about earlier with the fatigue and energy and all that stuff. Many primaries, if they do script it, it'll be a once a week injection at 200 milligrams. Or if they go to like a fly-by-night TRT clinic, most of them are located down here in Florida. Everyone gets the same script of once a week, 200 milligrams. And that's actually a very antiquated protocol. All our guys are on at least 3 times a week, if not more, because the more frequent you can inject it, the more it aligns with the body's natural release patterns. So the more stable the levels are in the numbers. But you don't need to just go by what the labs are. Like if someone looks at your labs and says, oh, your test is 1100, you're good. Like maybe the person needs less or they need more. So how you determine that is based, again, off symptoms and everything else they're doing in their life. The other 23 hours, they're not in the gym, or are they even in the gym? So it's best to start lower dosage wise and then titrate up, because it's very difficult to start really high and then bring somebody down.
Right.
So that's kind of the approach that we take. And then say they have suboptimal thyroid. Well, if someone goes on testosterone, typically thyroid will increase as well. So you may not need to start them on thyroid hormone if they need it right away. You want to wait at least 60 to 90 days to see, okay, does it do anything with the testosterone? Do we have to intervene with going on thyroid as well? So there's a lot of things. It's like a big orchestra with hormones, and making sure that everybody's kind of in sync with each other to get someone operating as best they can. So it's not just testosterone in isolation, which a lot of guys will think about, because then they're like, well, I'm at 800, I might be good. And it's like, well, you might need 1200, because some guys do. Everybody's different. So it's not a plug and play.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's, I've been very, very interested in, how engaged my doctor is with me, as you could probably tell with the lab results and everything else. But it's really, he only uses that number as a, where are you today sort of thing. But it's always asking questions about, how do you feel when you're doing this? He talks about all those symptoms at depth, and the number is just a metric out here. So I don't want to make this all about testosterone either, but I find that science absolutely amazing. So we got the man balanced. He's at that optimal level of testosterone, and you're working into the next portions of your training, his training, all of that. So most of the guys I know are, Midwestern guys, 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. If you just take that kind of body, we talked about it a little bit before that, and just want to clunk weights, right? But that's probably not the healthiest thing for a man. How do you build out that training?
So a lot of our guys, I mean, yeah, if they're doing like the 5-day bro splits, or if they're doing what they did in college when they played football or some other sport, they don't necessarily feel like they did in college. I'm pretty sure they're not performing the same way either. So it's getting them to detach from having to always train that way the rest of their lives and train in the way that makes sense for them in their current state. So we do have a handful of guys that have come from like the CrossFit world or the 5 to 6 day burst split world. They're just beat up. We actually bring them to like 3 days a week and they freak out. And they're like, I don't have enough volume on my chest and back and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, shut up. I'm like, we'll get there. Like, it's okay. Okay. We're not going to make you smaller. We've never done that with anybody. That's not our goal. You have to sometimes lay a foundation that wasn't there, clean up any asymmetries. Haven't met a guy yet that doesn't have some sort of fucked up shoulder issue from bench pressing his life away. So we kind of have to address that so we don't deal with more of that down the road. So maybe we're not flat bar bench pressing right now. Maybe we're dumbbell incline or something different that they don't like. So it's, again, where are they in their health journey? Where are they coming from? Like, how much are they training? What joint issues do they have? Any injuries we're navigating? What's their schedule like? Because this is a huge cognition where many guys like training 90 minutes. A lot of guys like to train for 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. But life now is not 90 minutes and 2 hours in the gym. Life now is kids, work, stress, all this stuff. So I've had this conversation twice in the last 2 weeks with guys where I'm like, we will do a half hour for 2 to 3 days. And then days you have more time, we can do longer. And they just can't like cognate that because they're like, well, if it's not 90 minutes, then it has to be nothing because that's just awful. And I'm like, 30 minutes is better than no minutes. Trust me, we can get an effective session in 30 minutes, but you have to now operate in the lifestyle that you have now, not college football, not I don't have a lot of responsibilities. But if you can get it done in 30 minutes and that's going to take you to where you want to be, are you willing to do that versus not doing anything at all? So sometimes the conversation has to come to that. But also, like, one thing I'll throw at them is like, they'll say what they need. Well, I need to do like 4 or 5 days. I need this. I need this. I'm like, that's great. Is that working for you right now? No. So trust the process. We'll get you where you want to be.
So that's interesting too, because you threw out there almost like a vision talk when you were talking about that. And I would say that, and you can correct me on this, of course, but I would say that a lot of guys don't know why they're doing it, right? They just, it's ego driven as well. I want boulder shoulders. I want pecs, I want abs, all that stuff. Rather than, I know when my last kid graduates from high school, I'm going to be 64 years old, not 24, 64 years old.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like a slob compared to these, 20 and 30-year-old dads, right?
Yeah.
I also want to be able to protect my family. There's different things. And I think it's very important that guys get connected with that in all aspects, not just the physical. But would you say that that's correct for most of your clients coming in as well?
That's what they've known to be right. Like the guys who do CrossFit, they do enjoy the community aspect. They enjoy feeling annihilated after training. They think that that's what's going to get them where they want to be. Totally get that and appreciate it. It's competitive. Like, so it feeds the athlete in them, or, if they were in the military, it kind of fills that void for them. So I understand why they're attracted to it. And it's not like we'll take that completely away, because we do have guys that are still doing CrossFit once or twice a week. We're just not doing it 7 days a week. And we're not doing it on sub 2,000 calories either. So we do have guys who just have to kind of shift to a different schedule or frequency or style of training to hit certain adaptations that we want in that standpoint. So if they need a better baseline of cardio, then we're going to have to do cardio. Like, some of them absolutely hate it. Some guys, they love it. So we have few endurance athletes, like we have to get them to train more and not as much cardio, but it's part of their training for when they compete. So it really depends like where they are. But yeah, a lot of guys, they don't really realize you could really do very well on a 3 to 4 day split. And I tell them, like, the last, I want to say 2 to 3 months, I've only trained twice a week because I'm training for a pole dance competition in 2 weeks. So I'm like, I'm competing in 2 weeks. Yeah. And they're like, what? But I'm like, yeah, I only lift twice a week. And then they're like, well, how do you like still look the way you do? I'm like, because you don't drop all your muscle because you just dropped 2 days of training, you know? So I think that's the fear, is that they don't think that they're going to change if they train less frequent. But I've been doing this a long time. I've seen more guys train less and make better gains in all aspects of their lives than those who want to do more. And then it just completely like blows up their physiology and everything. So
Yeah, and I mean, we all know it, right? I can work for 8 hours and not have a plan and get nothing done, or I can work for 2 hours with a rock star plan. And I mean, it's no different in the gym, right? You target what you need to target. So we've talked a lot about the man that, he's rebuilding himself. I know you're the vault, right? So I don't need any specific stories, but what have you seen as far as wins with men and their families, right? Their marriages, their children, things like that. You're dealing with CEOs, you're dealing with vice presidents, all these high achieving men in their businesses. But what kind of success stories are beyond the business, beyond the self?
we have one client who, he's a business owner. He was in remission from cancer. That left him just out of shape, depressed, overweight. And his wife actually encouraged him to get a coach. So he sought us out and has like completely transformed. He's got abs now, like his just confidence level, his energy level, and it bleeds into his business, right? Because obviously, if you show up differently at work, then it's going to result in probably making more money, which is a side effect of our coaching that, you know, just happens. So he just did a nice testimonial for us. I have another client, he's a doctor, and he actually worked with Bezos as well. And like we both told him, like, you got to get your shit together. So he literally went from looking overweight, tired, blah, very apathetic attitude, to like his whole staff is like, yo, who is this guy now? And he's sent us a bunch of his patients, and they're like, yeah, he is a completely different person. Like when he walks in the room, his confidence level, like you can feel it, the way he carries himself, his energy, like his confidence and what he's talking about, like it all shows. So that makes us happy when we hear stories like that. And that's pretty much like across the board. What happens is guys make more money, they feel more confident, they have more energy. So of course life is going to get better, because then you're more present for your wife, your kids, like everyone in your life, versus internalizing everything and thinking like, I just got to work harder at what I'm doing and just do it better, is never the solution. You actually just need structure, because these guys don't need another training plan. They don't need another diet. They've all tried every single diet that has a name. They've tried every workout program. The problem is they have, their doctor says this over here. They've got this training program and they've got this nutrition over here, and nobody talks to each other. So they piecemeal it together and they're like, okay, well, I'm managing my opinion of my doctor, which is completely opposite of my coach, but he's a doctor. So maybe I should trust him, but everyone's angry at each other, but they don't know each other's name, and it's a problem. Whereas with us, like everyone's on the same page. So we just make it really easy. So it's cool that when that takes effect and everything starts to click, then you see the shift, and then it's just awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I work with a lot of guys too who are in that same position, right? And we work in two different areas. But do you ever run across these guys who, I mean, you're telling them what you do, they're all excited about it, things like that, and then they're like, no, I can't take that money, or I can't take that time, away from my family.
All the time.
I get amazed with these guys, I tell them all the time, the best investment you can ever make in your family is the one that you make in yourself, right? you lead this entire ship. They follow your example. So do you try and convince these guys or just wait for them to come back?
They come back. I don't try to convince anybody. I will try to help them understand why it's a good idea. But I mean, if I have to convince someone to work with us, I don't want to work with them anyway. So it's more the way they see things sometimes, because typically, like, okay, if it's not financial, it's time, it's bandwidth, it's all the same thing. So, okay, cool. How about when we run out of time? Because you're staring at a lab panel that says you might die if you continue on the path, or you can't go to an event for your child because you're too tired, you're sick, you're, whatever. The ROI of investing in something like this, like I said, you make more money, but I can't like show that to them right away. So I can only show them other client stories, and I can only explain to them why what we do is a little bit different than just getting macros and training program. So I think it comes down to them trusting themselves, because they don't feel that they can actually commit to it. And maybe that's me doing a poor job of saying, like, we literally make it so you can't fail. Like, the only way to fail is if you don't communicate with us, because we talk to our guys on a daily basis. So unless you go MI, you're going to have us with you every step of the way, because a lot of our guys, they fly every week. Their schedule changes, cancellations, like meetings, delays, whatever. So like you have to be able to pivot. If you travel, you have to have a plan for that. And we set them up with that. Usually if they're traveling and going to all these conferences and business dinners and all that, they're like, oh my God, I have to give up all my alcohol, my steaks, all this stuff. And we're like, no, you actually don't. We can plan around that, but you don't realize that. So typically then they'll say like, I just can't commit to it now. I'm like, okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I just feel for these guys, they haven't seen that better side of life yet. So I probably do too much convincing in my arena.
I mean, we both do, but it's more like I shouldn't feel I should have to convince somebody, but also unless you explain why they're going to benefit from this, they may not see it, because they do pour money into their kids' sports and all this stuff, but they do reach a point where they're like, yeah, now it's time for me. It's driving home. Like, do you want to be happy with what you see in the mirror? Do you want to not fall asleep at 3 p.m. at your desk? Do you want to rely on 9 shots of espresso every day to be able to function? But the issue is, if they don't commit to something like this, then they will go Google biohacking supplements and like energy supplements and then low T clinics. And okay, that's a start, but that's not going to actually address what you really need.
It's just a piece of the puzzle. It's not the entire puzzle.
Yes.
Agreed. So I know you got a meeting coming up. So just to wrap this up, is there any final comments that you'd make to my listeners right now that we might not have covered through all this?
I'd say, like, please don't be afraid to outsource your health. It's not a weakness. Some of the biggest, we have A-listers, celebrities, we've got politicians, we've got C-suite executives. Like, those guys are quite powerful. They see the value in outsourcing that so that they can put their time, energy into other things, because you will see a ROI in something like this. If you want to see it firsthand, you can come to my event in November, the Silverback Summit, which Father Michael will be speaking at.
Nice.
That's in November, the 13th through 15th. And basically, it's a collection of all my trusted physicians, TRT doctors, fitness, nutrition professionals, entrepreneurs, all in the same room, all talking about men's health. And I make it fun because it's my event. There's no rules. So it's really fun. But that's the 4th year I'm doing it. And it literally is for anyone who has an interest in men's health, whether they're a coach, they're a physician, they're a dude who just wants to know the truth of like, what do I have to do and where do I have to go and who do I have to talk to? And they can go to silverbacksummit.com to take a look at that.
I appreciate you being on, Ali. I will put your link and and all that in the show notes. I want to make sure that you get to your appointment because I know how much your clients matter to you.
Yeah.
So once again, appreciate you being on here. Appreciate you speaking in my life.
Thank you.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.